guys and welcome back. My name is Cecelia Minard and this is my YouTube channel. This is a different video for me. What does that even mean? This is a different type of video for me. I'm not a booktuber by any means, although when I was 12 I really wanted to be. I thought I would share the books I've read this year in 2020. I only read 14 books this year, which I'm really proud of because my Goodreads goal was 10. Back in like middle school and elementary school, I would read like 40 or 50 books a year. And then once I started high school, I kind of just fell out of that, I guess with like the busyness of high school. So whether you're an avid reader that's read dozens of books this year or not so much and you've only read a couple, let's sit down and talk about the books I've read this year and give you some ideas of what to read in the future maybe. So some of these were for school. I took a Women in Lit class last spring semester, so the beginning of 2020, and we read probably about like 5 or 6 books for that. So the first book I read this year is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I don't have it on me because I borrowed my boyfriend's copy, but I really love this book. I rated it 5 stars. It's about a 16-year-old girl named Star who goes to a fancy, mostly white prep school. One night she witnesses her childhood friend get shot by a police officer. And then it's just kind of about the turmoil after that and what she chooses to do and what she chooses to do with her voice. The next book I read is How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents by Julia Alvarez. I rated this book 3 stars. I didn't dislike this book, it just wasn't my favorite. It was kind of slow in my opinion, but so it's about the Garcia family having to flee their country, the Dominican Republic, because of their father's part in overthrowing the dictator. And it's about their lives in America and kind of having to live in between 2 cultures. This takes place in like the 60s mostly, I believe. I don't remember exactly why I rated this book 3 stars. I think at times the way it was written was just confusing to me and too abstract for what it was in my opinion, but I truthfully don't really remember. I did like the story though, and I like that it took place in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. 3 stars isn't a bad rating. 3 stars to me means like it was decent, but it wasn't that great. So the next book I read was also for my Women in Literature class, and that's Beloved by Toni Morrison. This book I gave 4 stars. This book is about Setha, who is a woman who was born a slave and escaped to Ohio. But 18 years after she escaped, she is still haunted by the ghost of her child. She's also haunted by the memories of being a slave on that farm. Yeah, there's a lot more to unpack there, but that's the brief synopsis. I really like this book. It was devastating and sad, but heart-wrenching and really good. Even though I read it for school, I read it pretty quickly and I really enjoyed it. The next book I read was The Reader by Bernard Schlink. So this book takes place in post-World War II Germany. It's about a young boy named Michael who's a teenager for most of the book, and he meets a woman, I think in her 30s. They develop a relationship, if you know what I mean, an intimate relationship, and then she disappears from his life and he doesn't see her again until he's a law student many years later, and he finds out a horrifying secret about her. This book was really good. What did I give it? I gave it 4 stars. I read it in one day. So I would highly recommend this book. It's a quick read, very entertaining. Is it bad to say this is entertaining? It's kind of a sad book, I will admit. It's kind of sad, but very interesting. The next book I read was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I gave this book 5 stars and I really, really enjoyed this one. So this book is about 2 black sisters in about, I think, the 30s and 40s it takes place. One of them is a missionary in Africa and the other is living in the South. This was another one I read for my Women in Literature class and I really enjoyed this book. It's a super easy read. Just the way it's written from the main character's point of view, and she's an uneducated woman in the South in like the 30s, so she never got the chance to have an education, so that made it pretty quick to read. This book, even though I read it over half a year ago, it's still fresh in my mind and it just has really, really stuck with me. Unlike some of the other books I've read, there's a lot more to it than what I just described, but I'm gonna leave it at that. The next book I read was also for my Woman in Lit class, and that is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I gave this book 4 stars. So this book takes place in the early 1950s and it's about a young woman named Esther Greenwood who seems happy and successful and beautiful, but she slowly begins to deteriorate and slip into a mental breakdown. This book is depressing, but I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was super interesting because it deals a lot with mental health in like the 1950s, just the lack of understanding of it really. Very good, and I recommend. The next book I read was for my final project for the Women in Lit class I took, and we got to choose any book written by a female author. So I chose The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I honestly wasn't as into this book as I expected to be. I only gave it 3 stars. I had a lot of expectations around this book. It's super hyped up. Everybody loves it. It just felt like another dystopian novel to me. Like, it really didn't seem like anything special. I read a lot of dystopian literature in my days, and this just kind of blended in with the rest of them, except it focused more on women's rights. If you don't know, it's about a handmaid in the Republic of Gilead, which is what becomes of America after war, I believe. Basically, handmaids are servants to richer families for childbirth purposes. Like the rich wives don't birth children, the handmaids do, and that is Offred's job. Women aren't allowed to read, women don't have any rights, women just basically cannot do anything in this society. I thought this book was decent. I didn't dislike it. It just didn't live up to the hype for me. Nonetheless, I gave it 3 stars because it wasn't terrible. I expected a lot more from it. So the next book I read was The Awakening by Kate Chopin, which I don't have a copy of anymore because it was the school's copy. This took place in like 1899, but this book shocked a lot of people in the time because it was about a woman who was unfaithful to her husband, and there was just like no pieces of literature like that at that point in time. So this book, obviously, it's not really shocking to us anymore today, but I think it's really cool to have that like piece of history and understand that at a time that was like crazy, and it was crazy to write about this from a woman's perspective and see what she was thinking and what she was going through. So I did enjoy this. It was really kind of slow in my opinion though. I only gave it 3 stars, but it was interesting, just not my favorite. The next piece I read was actually a play, and this is a reread for me, and that is Our Town by Thornton Wilder. I love this play so much. This is one of my favorite works of literature. It's 5 stars for me. It's about a small town in the early 20th century. But first, I think if you don't know what you're getting into when you start reading this, it's slow and boring. And I think that's the point, because we feel like everyday mundane life is slow and boring. To me, this is about just recognizing what we have in front of us and not taking our loved ones and our time for granted. I just think this is a piece that everyone should read, and I think that this play contains one of the most important and valuable lessons in life. I highly recommend this, and if you are having trouble like reading through it because it is a play, I recommend reading along or just watching the play on YouTube. You can find lots of different versions of it. It's one of my favorite pieces ever, so I definitely recommend this. Okay, so now we're getting into the books that I've read within the last week and a half. This is called Tangled Webs by Lee Bross. So Tangled Webs is about a notorious blackmailer named Lady A, who, with just a gown and a mask to disguise her, she sweeps into lavish balls and exclusive events to collect the most valuable secrets in 1725 London. But she's kind of living a double life. Lady A is her disguise when she goes to these balls and collects secrets. But in reality, she's just a 17-year-old girl named Arista who mostly dresses as a boy throughout the day to avoid the terrifying times of 1725 London. But one night at one of the balls, she meets this guy named Grayson. She just feels an instant connection, and she's like, dang, I hate my life, basically. I don't know. Anyway, this guy named Grayson, he is so interesting to her because he's traveled the world and she wants to travel the world, and she kind of starts having a crush on him right off the bat. Of course, she can't really pursue this because she is a lowly beggar, basically, just dressing up as a fancy woman to go collect secrets. Basically, that's the gist of it. I gave this book 3 stars. I originally wanted to give it like 4, but there was parts of it that were kind of stupid. But I'm really grateful for this book because it did get me back into reading. Parts of it were kind of dumb, and I'm like, I don't think 1700s London really was like that. But nonetheless, entertaining, a quick read, and I enjoyed. The next book I read is The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. Thank God I finally said that name right. It took me many tries. This book was a 5-star. Get it? I have stars on my necklace. There's 5 of them. So this book was awesome. I loved it. It was super entertaining right from the start. It's about a 17-year-old girl named Leah who is the princess of a kingdom, and she is being forced into an arranged marriage with the prince from another kingdom, but she does not want that, so she runs away to a city called Tahara. So after she escapes to Tahara, these two interesting and mysterious young men show up, and Leah is unaware that one of them is the prince she was supposed to marry and the other is an assassin sent there to kill her. And that's the basic setup to this book. It's super entertaining and I really liked it. I'm not one for like fantasy usually, but this was light enough fantasy to not scare me away. I really enjoyed this book. The next book I read was Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi. I think that's how you say her name. I gave this book 2 stars because I was not the biggest fan of this book. So this book is about a teenage girl who's 17. Her name's Juliet. Why is every single protagonist 17? I don't know, I couldn't answer that question, but nonetheless, Juliet's 17 and no one understands why her touch is fatal. The re-establishment, which is like the new government in place, plans on using her as a weapon. Juliet, however, does not want to be used as a weapon, as you would imagine. She is highly against that. She kind of devises a plan to make this not happen. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I thought it was kind of corny most of the time. So that's why it was 2 stars. It was like decent. I just think so much has been done with like dystopian books that it's like hard to find a really good one. This one, it wasn't terrible. I read it in 1 day actually, so it was entertaining. It just wasn't my favorite. And the main character got on my nerves quite a bit, but you know, it's okay. The next book I read is a kind of like a fantasy slash dystopian. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but that is Incarnate by Joni Meadows. Oh, there's a piece of tape on it. I enjoyed this book a lot actually. So this book is about Anna, who is a new soul, living in a world where everybody else has been alive for 5,000 years, reincarnating into different bodies. One day, a soul named Sienna dies and she never reincarnates, and instead Anna is born in her place. Anna has felt dejected her whole entire life, so when she turns 18, she decides to go to the capital city of Heart and try to figure out why she was born and how this happened. This was actually really good, and I'm gonna continue the series. I believe there's 3 books total. The romance is really cute. I really like it. It's kind of weird at times, but hi baby. She wants to take a nap with me, but we're not napping right now, silly. We have other things to do. So yeah, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it thoroughly and I'm excited to read the rest of the series. The next book I just finished this morning, and that is the 2nd book of the Remnant Chronicles. So The Kiss of Deception was the 1st book in the Remnant Chronicles, and then there is the Heart of Betrayal. I gave this book 3 stars. I was kind of expecting more from it since I liked the 1st book so much. I in no way disliked this book, but it was slow in my opinion, and not as much happened as I thought would happen. I nonetheless enjoyed it, and I'm reading the 3rd book now, so there's that. And I'm not going to give a synopsis about this book because it kind of spoils what happens at the end of the 1st one. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed doing this. Maybe this can be like a end of the year tradition every year on my channel from now on. I'd like doing that. I think this is really fun and interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Bye! Delilah, say bye. Say bye. See you guys.